Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, Series 2000. This week, I'm excited to visit Are You Terrified Yet? I didn't know what to expect going into this one, and to be honest, was a bit put off by the title because I thought it sounded silly, but this ended up being a really enjoyable story. Stein is able to pull off some humor without it feeling forced, and we have a protagonist with both personality and character growth. It doesn't go very hard on the scares, but still manages to be a good time. You should check it out if you haven't yet. This 1998 cover isn't my favorite, although spiders are always a solidly creepy choice. It makes sense considering one of the scare challenges involves spiders, but I think it would have been fun to do something with the funeral parlor, since that's where the real action takes place. For merchandise, I actually found a Series 2000 t-shirt featuring the spider from the cover stating, "See you on the web," which I found amusing. In the back of the book, we also have part 4 of the Creepstakes contest, where kids were challenged to finish Stein's story starter and had to use special words in the back of the book within their story. This week, the two words were claw and mosquito. I was able to find the second place winner of this contest, so I'll put the link in the description so you can read it. Our front take says, "Along came a spider," which is a line from the nursery rhyme Little Miss Muffet. But let's check out the back of this book. Go Craig, Amy chanted, urging me on. I lowered my hands to the coffin lid. The wood felt cool and smooth. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. It's no big deal. A coffin is just a big wooden box. It's no different than lying down on a bed. I took a deep breath, pushed with all my strength. The coffin lid slid open. I gazed inside and started to scream. Okay, let's start this summary. The book opens with an introduction to Craig, and he is a classic Goosebumps Freddy cat. Within a page, he scared himself with a dead leaf, thinking it was a live insect crawling on his neck. Craig is starting at a new school and is looking forward to an opportunity to reinvent himself, since his defining character trait is going to be coward, it appears. In addition to being a classic Goosebumps Freddy cat, Craig also lives in Nowhere, Ohio, like a proper Goosebumps protagonist should. Craig seems to have good reason for always being on edge. At his last school, he was terrorized by his classmates. They constantly put bugs down his shirt, called him Craig because he stutters when he's scared, and just took joy in startling him any way they could. Craig is off to a rough start pretty quickly though, because while biking to school, he suddenly crashes hard, and if that wasn't bad enough, he looks up just in time to see a van coming full speed at him, ready to crush him Toxic Avenger style. He's able to roll out of the way, but then he spots a woman at the top of the hill screaming, my baby, because apparently this car rolled away with a baby in it. Craig now thinks this is his chance to be a hero and makes a dive for the car door, but bounces right off of it on his first try. Undeterred, he hops up and races for the car again, which is rolling into a busy intersection. With some chapter cliffhanger dramatics, Craig is able to grab the door the second time. He hops in the driver's seat and slams on the brakes, sending his face smashing into the windshield. But he's done it. He successfully saved a baby from impending doom, which is a pretty great first impression for a new school. He wants to faint from his head injury, but a crowd of cheering kids motivates him to stay conscious and fully absorb his new hero status, although he feels a bit like a fraud considering he just kinda happened to crash his bike in front of a runaway car. A girl in the crowd introduces herself as Amy, along with two boys, Travis and Brad, who just so happen to be in his 6th grade class too. They want to know if he's always so brave, and Craig just goes with it and starts boasting how fearless he always is. The story jumps to the second day of school, and things are still going great for Craig. Kids want to meet him, and even random teachers are giving him thumbs up. The kid is a legend, but deep down he still feels like stuttering Craig. He runs into the 3 kids from earlier, and Travis mentions that Brad needs help standing up to his 9th grade brother Grant, who just finished stuffing Brad into a locker. Craig doesn't know how to handle all this newfound bravery, and it's suggested that Craig stand up to Grant on behalf of Brad. This is not what Craig signed up for, considering he is 6 inches shorter than the rest of these kids, and is certainly in no position to be fighting 9th graders, so he successfully dodges the invitation for a fight, for now. However, he finds himself once again being forced into the role of hero later that day, when Amy appears and wants help getting her little brother out of an enormous tree. I'd say call the fire department. If they can rescue cats, I'm certain they can pull a random kid down. Craig is not ready for this because he's terrified of heights, to the point even riding escalators makes him nauseous. Escalators only make me nervous because of their potential to shred a person. At this point, a crowd is gathered, and Craig has succumbed to peer pressure, so up the tree he goes. To add a little tension, the branch the boy is stuck on begins to crack, causing unskilled Craig to have to climb even faster. He gets within arm's reach of the little boy, but the branch snaps, slamming the little boy to the tree trunk, where he's able to shimmy down on his own. Unfortunately for Greg, his branch also snaps and he crashes through the branches to the ground, with a bird nest grasped in his hand that he managed to snag in the struggle. He expects the crowd to ridicule him, but to his surprise they all cheer, They think Craig showed the little boy how to climb down from the tree and saved a bird's nest from crashing to the ground. Craig is stunned by this interpretation of the events, and his hero status remains strong. Fake it till you make it, Craig. Am I saying Greg this whole time? I better not be. Oh, fuck. The crowd is still cheering, and someone even suggests they notify the mayor, but suddenly Travis and Brad declare he's a phony because they actually saw him fall out of the tree. Amy comes to Craig's defense and declares he's braver than both of the other boys put together. Craig really doesn't appreciate this because he doesn't want to find himself in a brawl with two much larger kids. This all escalates to Amy challenging the two boys that they'll never be able to frighten Craig, while Craig is standing there like, gee, thanks Amy. We then jump to Saturday afternoon, and Craig is hanging out at Amy's house. The kids are bored and looking for something to do, so Amy suggests they explore a creepy old attic. Craig is not about that and thinks attics are scary. We then get a brief and unnecessary recap of the book's events so far. It's only been 32 pages, so I'm not sure why Stein felt it was needed. They settle on watching a scary movie, which is perfect since it's dark and stormy out. Craig, again, is not really into this, but is trying to maintain his newfound persona, so they start watching Killer Day Camp. Craig tries to play it cool at first, but when the killer pops out in a surprise attack on screen, Craig lets out a blood-curdling scream. He's certain Amy will now know he's a wimp, but instead she just laughs and agrees scary movies are way more fun if you scream along with them and get into it. I have to agree with that. It's way more fun to let yourself get scared. So the two kids spend the rest of the movie screaming their heads off, except Amy is having a grand old time, while Craig is genuinely terrified. They're then interrupted by a knock at the door, with Travis telling Craig to come out. This makes Craig's stomach drop because he knows Travis and Brad have somehow uncovered his past. Travis reveals his cousin Pam goes to Craig's old school and told him all about the time Craig ran away from a chipmunk, which Craig acknowledges to himself was true, but that it was a particularly large chipmunk. Travis and Brad brought 3 other boys from school, Frankie, Gus, and David, so this is quite the entourage of bullies for Craig to deal with. He ends up denying all the stories from his past and calls Travis's cousin a liar. Brad then has an evil smile because he brought the first test to Craig's bravery and pulls out a large glass jar filled with dozens of black hairy spiders. It's then decided Craig will keep his hand in the jar of spiders for 5 minutes for $30. Craig, of course, is terrified of bugs in general, so this was again the work of Amy speaking on his behalf. This moves rather quickly, and soon Craig actually has his hand inside the jar, and it sounds as uncomfortable as you might imagine it would be. He lasts about a minute before he decides he can't take it anymore. He goes to yank his hand out of the jar, but it's stuck. To make matters worse, the spiders start biting his fingers. He's trying his best to pull out, but is failing miserably. Travis notices him struggling, but Amy distracts everyone by continuing to cheer on about how brave Craig is. Soon, the 5 minutes are up, so they won the bet, but Craig still can't get his hand out of the spider jar, and decides to tell the group of boys that he's just going to keep it in a little longer, further solidifying his bravery. Amy, of course, makes this worse by declaring double or nothing, so now Craig has to deal with some other horrible challenge after he survives the current one. Amy then begins taunting the boys to think of something actually scary for Craig to try, and it's kind of like, damn Amy, speak for yourself. Craig eventually gets Amy's attention properly, and she's able to help him pull the jar off. His hand is now bright red and swollen from all the spider bites. Amy comments how gross it looks, and Craig heads home to soak his hand in ice water and to cover it in various ointments. The story then jumps to next Saturday, and Craig has found himself challenging Amy to a game of ping pong after lying about being a champion. Craig needs to get this lying under control because it's starting to branch out into all areas. They head down to the basement towards the ping pong table when the lights go out and Craig freezes. At this point, you should already know, Craig is afraid of both the dark and basements, so this isn't an ideal situation for him. Amy wants to know why he froze, and Craig gives her a half-truth and actually confesses to being scared of basements. He then tells her an elaborate lie about how as a toddler he was left in a dark basement for hours, surrounded by rats. Amy thinks Craig is still incredibly brave for surviving the ordeal and for sharing his story. Craig can do no wrong in Amy's eyes. There's then a knock at the door, and Amy's like, oh, by the way, Travis and his gang of assholes are stopping by with a poisonous snake for you to kiss. No big deal, right? Before Craig can even respond though, they hear cries for help on the other side of the door. They open it and spot Travis with his hand over a bloody eye. The boys declare they had a snake, but it escaped, and Travis tripped and poked out his eye while trying to catch it. Travis then opens his palm and reveals a veiny, bloody eyeball. Craig then surprises everyone, me included, and casually snatches up the eye and pops it in his mouth. Amy is horrified, but Craig just laughs and rolls the eye around in his mouth, before stating that he recognized the eye as a fake one he saw at the store. Amy starts demanding the boys pay up because they failed to scare Craig, but they claim that wasn't actually the scare test, just a quick little prank. I was impressed that Craig wasn't actually scared of something for once. I have to say, so far I'm really enjoying this one. It's a very simple concept, but written in an entertaining way where I haven't been bored with it once. It's funny without trying too hard. The group of boys don't actually have a scare challenge for Craig at the moment though. They just stop by to remind him that Travis's dad owns a funeral parlor to build up some suspense for the next challenge. It's then the next Monday at school, and Amy is right back to low-key trying to ruin Craig's life. They spot Brad's older brother Grant stuffing him into a locker. Amy shoves Craig towards the action and wants him to fight off Grant to protect Brad. Craig has no interest in getting destroyed by a 9th grader, but as he stumbles up to Grant, he somehow accidentally trips Grant, causing him to crash to the floor and storm off in a huff. The crowd of kids interpret this as Craig punching Greg out and begin cheering for him. Craig is simultaneously incredibly lucky and unlucky. Brad is thrilled somebody stood up to his bully of a brother, and even he is beginning to take a liking to Craig. We again have a time jump a few days later, and Craig is busy studying with Amy when Brad appears at the door to summon Craig for his next scare challenge. Brad seems upset and thinks Travis is going too far with the next scare, but Amy is relentless and insists Craig can handle whatever it is. The 3 kids then head over to Shady Rest Funeral Parlor, where Travis has the next scare in store. They meet David, Gus, and Frankie. Travis is mysteriously missing, and the boys claim he got caught sneaking out and couldn't make it, which is obviously bullshit. Craig then learns to pass the next scare challenge, he'll have to sneak into an open window in the funeral parlor and crawl into an open coffin. This sounds better than the spiders to be honest, but we all know Travis is gonna pull some shit. Before Craig can crawl into the window though, the kids all watch seriously as a van stops by to drop off a fresh body bag, reminding the kids that there really are dead people in this building. Once the body delivery guys are gone, Craig pulls himself up to the window and is struck by the stink of formaldehyde, which he confuses for the smell of rotting corpses. He ventures into the window and almost immediately trips over what he thinks is a dead body, but it's actually just a random duffel bag. He then comes across a row of coffins and does as instructed. He opens the very first one and is face to face with a corpse, causing him to holler in fright. Amy's psychotic ass is then like, well, jump in, we got $60 on the line. And Craig actually begins to crawl into the coffin with a dead body. But, surprise, the corpse's hands shoot out and grab Craig by the collar. They wrestle for a bit, causing Craig to drag the body out of the coffin, and he eventually ends up on top of it, pulling off a mask, revealing Travis of course. Travis is pissed because he was certain Craig would have screamed and ran away, but in reality, Craig tried to, he just got tangled up with Travis. Amy continues to be a supportive menace, and declares double or nothing again for one final challenge, where he'll actually have to crawl into a coffin with a real corpse. I'm pretty sure Travis's dad would take issue with these kids playing around with dead bodies. We then hop to later in the story, and Craig has decided he's had enough. There is no way he can crawl in a coffin with a dead body, so he calls Amy and spends 2 pages confessing all of his sins. When he's done, she's just like, LOL, you're only saying that because you don't want to take Travis and Brad's money. You're such a good person. Craig is left dumbfounded, and he really should be considering his friendship with Amy because the girl's delusional. Amy hangs up and the final challenge is still on, despite Craig's pleas. It's then the next night, and the group of kids are all outside the funeral parlor once again, waiting to do a little Goosebumps breaking and entering. Travis promises no tricks this time, just a good old-fashioned corpse snuggle session. Once inside the building, Travis suddenly lowers the stakes and says Craig just has to shake the dead man's hand and give him a cheek-to-cheek hug. I feel like Scholastic or Parachute, or whoever the editor was, stepped in and said, no, Stein, the kid cannot snuggle a corpse, that's too much. Craig comes face to face with an old dead man and cautiously shakes his hand, which is a fairly disturbing scene as all these morbid-ass kids stand around some person's dead loved one as a kid pokes at him. Craig then goes on to fulfill part 2 of the agreement and goes for the cheek-to-cheek hug. As he's leaning over the coffin for a big old bear hug, he suddenly hears the cracks of other coffins snapping open, and shit gets real wild all of a sudden. I let out a cry and staggered back against the wall. Gazing across the room, I saw hands pushing the lids open from inside the coffins. Swollen red hands, bruised purple hands, pale hands white as flour. We've disturbed the dead, I shrieked. The lid stood straight up on the coffin next to us. I heard an ugly hoarse groan. A green-skinned corpse sat up, turning its decayed head. It tried to open its eyes, but they were sewn shut. The room was filled with throaty groans and sighs like air escaping from tires. Another coffin lid lurched open. A corpse with yellowed, rotting face began lowering itself from its coffin. Another corpse lurched into a sitting position across from him. I gasped as I saw white worms wiggling out of his nostrils. Travis opened his mouth in a howl of horror. This is impossible, David shrieked. We've disturbed them, I wailed. We all screamed as the closet door swung open. The door slammed hard against the wall, and a hideous corpses fell out, staggering like sleepwalkers, eyes sewn shut, their skin splotchy, falling off of their gray skulls. Arms outstretched, they moved so stiffly, groaning, groaning from the deep of their caved-in chests as they staggered across the room, towards us. Amy screamed. Travis and Brad backed up beside me, their mouths open, eyes wide. I heard another gasping groan, and turned to see a corpse drop to the floor. His head was covered in floppy white-brimmed hat. He wore a huge trench coat, many sizes too big for him. With another groan, he pulled himself up and began staggering towards us. As he lurched forward, his hat tilted back. We screamed as his face came into view. Half a face. Only half a face. Gray skin stretched over bone, a dead mouse clinging to his empty eye socket. No, we all howled in horror, but our cries were drowned out by the deep, ugly groans, gasping for breath, the hissing sighs. A tall purple-skinned corpse led the others. Head bowed, eyes sewn shut, he pulled one leg forward, then another. Suddenly, he stopped. I let out a cry as his left hand fell off. It hit the floor with a soft plop and bounced under one of the lab tables. The corpse paused for a second, then came lurching blindly towards us again. "Let's get out of here," Gus screamed, his face twisted in panic. Too late. They had us all cornered. They had us backed against the wall. I glanced down at the old man, the only corpse that didn't rise up. Shuffling their shoes over the floor, the corpses moved closer. Closer. "Craig, do something," Amy shrieked. Craig is able to fend off the corpses while the others crawl out the window, leaving him to fend for himself as he tries to break free from the corpse's grasp. He's able to get back to the window as he watches all the kids flee home, and then we learn all this was a little too exciting to be true. We cut to Craig entering Brad's house, where they begin congratulating each other on a successful prank. It turns out Brad's brother's friends dressed up as corpses and hid in the coffins to teach these kids a lesson. Brad had felt like Travis was going too far and wanted to end these scare challenges once and for all. We then get a very "you can't scare me" plot twist, where Brad's brother is like, "Oh, by the way, sorry we couldn't make it to the funeral parlor after all," meaning the corpses were real. This causes Brad to flee the room in fright, but once again, plot twist. Craig just needed to pay Brad back a little bit for the first two pranks, so the corpses really were just costumes. Craig walks home satisfied with surviving all these scare challenges, shedding his old Craig identity, and feeling like a superhero. But in a last page twist, there isn't one. Craig walks home still slightly afraid of the dark, but on top of the world. Overall, I thought Are You Terrified Yet was a really solid story. I think I've become so accustomed to bland protagonists in Goosebumps that Craig's character arc really stood out to me. It was fun watching this cowardly kid continue to face his fears, only to be met with a more intense scare around the corner. I enjoyed both the scenes in the funeral home with the dead bodies, especially once they all sprang to life and scared the shit out of all the kids. The double twist with Craig convincing Brad that the corpses were actually real was a nice touch, and it was also cool that the story actually ended on a pretty positive note. I'm gonna give this one 5 out of 5 coffins. It felt like Stein took some of the ideas from You Can't Scare Me and improved on them. As far as the vomit count goes, despite the disgusting smells of formaldehyde and dead bodies, there was no vomit in this one. This leaves our Series 2000 total to 9 vomits. Well, that's it for Are You Terrified Yet? This book had a simple premise that was well executed, and it kept me entertained throughout. Next week is Headless Halloween, and I'm excited for Stein to give us another proper Halloween story like Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. It's also once again completely unfamiliar to me though. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Are You Terrified Yet? Did you enjoy this one as much as me? Did you think the dead were actually coming to life at first? How long before you would have stuffed Amy in a coffin? Also, what did you think of my Fear Factor horror clips this week? It's outside my usual clip range, but it felt appropriate for this book. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,